Hi, everybody. Good evening. Tonight, we're going to talk about chronic pain, inflammation, and some simple treatments that maybe aren't very commonly talked about. So if at any time you have any questions, please put those in the chat, or you can simply email us after the fact. I want to thank you all for coming and for tuning in tonight. I'm the owner of Maker's Compounding Pharmacy. We are a PCAB accredited pharmacy. I've been a pharmacist for actually 35 years now. And I just want to let you know that I'm also an LDN master and I'm an LDN consultant. We're going to talk a little bit about low-dose naltrexone this evening. I'm also an A4M functional medicine pharmacist candidate. So what is inflammation and what is, chronic pain? Pain is perceived by a wide variety of nerve endings, and it really is the inflammatory process around the central nervous system in the tissues that you may actually feel pain in one location, but the inflammation may actually start further up the nerve channel, so maybe even centrally located in the spinal column. And that is why sometimes pain medications are not as effective as other times, and why sometimes we have to approach that pain or inflammatory process with several different kinds of medications. Because if we don't take care of the issue, sometimes that inflammatory process can actually lead to other things and other chronic medical conditions, and perhaps even can cause not only chronic issues, but issues that cannot be reversed or not even very effectively treated with medications. So it's really important that we talk about your wellness profile. What symptoms are you experiencing and what do those mean? How long have you had those issues? And what exactly can be done? A lot of times when you go to the physician's office or your provider's office, they ask you questions, those exact same questions. How long have you had this? When did it start? Was it caused by an injury? And then a lot of times that it then starts to write prescriptions. But a lot of times you're also told, well, if you ate better and exercised, you'd have less inflammation and pain. Learn to meditate, decrease your stress, take a little time for yourself. And you just got to take some vitamins, but then other times you're told, well, if you take vitamins, that just makes for expensive pee. Well, we don't get a lot of vitamins and nutrients from our food. So it's really important that we use medications appropriately for those specific conditions. And really, we need to take a look at our stress, because stress increases inflammation and usually chronic pain. What we also know is that sometimes the medications that were prescribed can actually lead to more inflammation and pain when they're taken for longer periods of time, mainly due to nutrient deficiencies that they cause. So how do you really help yourself and advocate for yourself? Because the other thing that I hear literally on a daily basis is that people have been dealing with their chronic issues for a long period of time, months, years, decades. And they may have seen a variety of physicians, practitioners, chiropractors, nutritionists, acupuncturists, and they still just don't have all the benefits that they're seeking. They're not feeling really any better. And so with that, that's exactly what we're trying to do today, is give you some knowledge, give you a little bit of information so that you can make really good choices for yourself. Because the bottom line is, you're the one that has to live with yourself. You're the one that is looking for answers, looking for better information. And we're just here to perhaps provide a little bit of that. So you can get a hold of us. And there are a wide variety of practitioners that can also help as well. And we have a long list of those, and we can certainly help you. And that doesn't mean that the current providers that you are seeing are bad or wrong. It's just sometimes there might be someone who might be able to give you just a little bit more help in an area that will allow everything else to fall in place. We cannot forget our emotional wellness. You know, if we're happy, we feel less pain. But in order for us to be happy, we need to really take a look at some of the root or foundational issues that are behind chronic inflammation and pain. And a lot of times, how we feel here mentally has a huge bearing on what we feel physically in our muscles and our joints. And a lot of times that actually stems by what's going on in our gut. What we do know is that about 90% of our serotonin, so serotonin is our happy hormone, that is made in our gut. And we also make a wide variety of medium chain fatty acids, which are brain fuel in our gut. And most of our immune factors that help us to ward off infection and help us to deal with stress and inflammation and modulate our immune system, again, it's all made in our gut. So if we focus on gut health, that is one area that we can, most all of us can improve on. But if we do focus in on our gut, a lot of times we can alleviate not only inflammation and chronic pain, but sometimes we're happier, we're healthier. Sometimes we can actually shed a few pounds if that's necessary, or even be able to move and have more energy. Did I forget one? Nope, there we go. So the bottom line is that most of our emotional well-being is led by different brain cells and how they are activated. So that's called microglia. Microglia is the majority of our brains. It's the gray matter that conducts a wide variety of electricity and helps to conduct other things. But there are some other areas that cause pain. And a lot of times there is an underlying infection, whether it's bacterial, fungal, viral, protozoal. It could be from a wide variety of areas. And that sometimes is what we see in changes in bowel habits, changes in weight, a wide variety of skin rashes, as well as just emotional well-being. Sometimes it has to do with environmental pollution, heavy metals, toxins, chemicals that we're exposed to through receipt paper, how we fertilize the yard. Some people have a sensitivity to gluten. Sometimes gluten is considered a toxin in the body. We can never forget when somebody has had a traumatic brain injury, whether it's a concussion through a motor vehicle accident, perhaps somebody was in the military, perhaps somebody was injured during a sports activity. All of that is really, really important. But we also cannot forget the violent issues that happen in a home as well. In immune issues, autoimmune situations dramatically contribute to what's going on in the brain and also systemically in how we perceive pain. And all of this can lead to aging. And that's one thing that a lot of people are wanting to do, is to age gracefully. Nobody really has ever envisioned being 70 years old and toting around a bag of medications and not having the energy to go out and do the things that we want to do in our retirement years. When we're younger, we always feel that, our retirement years are supposed to be our golden years. And those are the times when we're going to travel, we're going to seek adventure, we're going to relax, and we're going to do the things that we've always really wanted to do. Well, if we don't take care of our bodies much earlier, then we're going to have maybe less time to do those things that we really like to do, or perhaps even just less energy to do the things that we really want to do. So it's really important. And when I talk about hormonal balance and why that is so key, I'm not just talking about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. I'm talking about thyroid. I'm talking about our stressor hormones. And all of those are very, very important because they all play together, and hopefully they're playing together nicely. So microglia are the small cells in the brain. They are a major component of inflammation, and that can cause a wide variety of changes that not only happen in the brain, but help happen in the central spinal column that can then cause changes in the nerves, which then go out to the arms and the legs and in the periphery. It can change not only how we think, but how we behave, and that can change day to day, month to month. It can also change the way we respond to allergens, as well as how we respond to those pathogens that are potentially cancer causing. So these are, again, are some of the causes that we went over. And I also want to stress here that in bullet point number 5, that Alzheimer's disease and dementia is definitely due to an inflammatory process in the brain. It is not a normal part of aging. It wasn't a normal, it's never been a normal part of aging, but it can definitely be linked back to changes in hormonal status and also changes in blood sugar status. So if you have diabetes and it's not well controlled, most of those individuals do see assortment of symptoms related to dementia and perhaps Alzheimer's as well. We're also seeing a wide variety of individuals. It seems like there's more and more individuals that are being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease. Now, Huntington's has a genetic component, so, but we are seeing more and more diagnoses. But really, we're seeing a tremendous amount of autoimmune disease diagnoses. And, now I want to say, so a couple of years ago, there were about 104 autoimmune categories or diagnoses, but we're seeing many, many more. And I want to say now there's closer to 140 diagnoses, whether it's multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, could be a wide variety of autoimmune issues associated with the thyroid or even autism. There's a wide variety out there, and rarely does one person have just one, but usually many other. And so they might start with one diagnosis, but then through the years, others kind of tend to crop up. And we cannot forget diabetes, because diabetes is absolutely an inflammatory disease, as is high blood pressure, as is osteopenia and osteoporosis. There's so much more. So in the adult brain, we are able to see changes up with electroencephalogram images. And what's interesting is that we can make dramatic impact on that, and we can regrow some of those neurons or some of those brain cells if they're done, if it's done in an appropriate manner and making sure that someone has enough nutrients on board. But most of these issues can also change sleep patterns, and sleep and stress will absolutely decrease, if not stop, the production of new brain cells in the adult. So we've got to have really good sleep, and we've got to be able to manage our stress. And that's where the meditation and prayer happens, and why that's so impactful. But also, not everybody is cut out to be exercising and training for a marathon. There are other ways to actually identify what types of exercise are best for you. So when we're taking a look at gut issues, because of the correlation that is so strong between what's going on in the gut and triggers for pain, we can always attribute issues back to diet. So whether someone understands or knows that they actually have intolerances or sensitivities to food, when you take those in, I've literally watched this in my family where, so I have family members that are gluten intolerant. So they're sensitive to egg, soy, nuts. And if they accidentally get into some of those foods, their personality can change within hours. They have more of a duller affect. They become irritated and irritable, and they become kind of grumpy. And a lot of times it changes their bowel habits, where they are in the bathroom quite a bit, or they're nauseated, or they just don't feel good. And that absolutely disrupts their sleep and it adds stress to the body. But the other thing that happens is it can actually change blood glucose levels, and it can not only affect them today, but it can affect them for days, if not weeks. So we also see that sometimes medications can contribute to pain issues, even though they're trying to decrease pain and inflammation. And it's not necessarily initially, but through the nutrients that they deplete in the body that then trigger kind of a snowball effect to that. So what can you do? What can you do literally today or tomorrow to make a big difference in your life? Well, the standard American diet is exactly that. It is the SAD, very sad. It is so important that when we eat food, that we really eat what I like to label as God food. If God made it, eat it. If God didn't make it, don't eat it. And that may sound a little hokey, but the bottom line is that, you know, we have meats and we have a lot of vegetables and we have some fruits. Pasta is not natural to nature. Pasta doesn't grow on a tree. It doesn't grow in the ground. It's man-made. Same thing with a lot of other foods and beverages. And so that's what I mean by God-made. We really should be eating anywhere up to a goal of 1 to 2 pounds of fruits and vegetables, more vegetables than fruits per day. And I've gone over these statistics before, where the gut produces more than 70% of our immune factors, more than 90% of our happy hormone serotonin, and also the medium chain fatty acids that work as brain food. So if we don't put the proper nutrients or the proper foods into our bodies, then all of these other pathways will suffer from that. We also know that through a wide variety of research, and that's the other thing that I'm trying to present to you tonight, is actual scientific links so that you can, again, educate yourself and perhaps educate your provider with ways that you want to improve your health pathway. So Dr. Perlmutter has written a couple of amazing books, and I love his book, Grain Brain. And literally on page 58, he goes into the specifics as to what happens with gluten. So gluten can increase inflammation throughout the body. And what's really interesting is that the protein gluten actually can substitute for our thyroid hormone, and it kind of looks like it. So it can actually impact and slow down our thyroid processes. So some people who eat a lot of gluten, it's more than just wheat. It can be in rye, it can be in barley, it can be in a wide variety of foods that we might not necessarily think there's those elements in there, but they're definitely there as an additive or a filler. So we see not only changes that we can visualize on testing through MRI, through a wide variety of electroencephalogram testing, but other testing as well. And we can change what the body is experiencing. And it may not necessarily be just today and short term. It can actually be very long term and potentially irreversible. So I think it's very important that we evaluate this. Gluten-free diets are not a fad. This is something that the foods that we have available today to us are very, very different than what our grandparents ate back in the first half of the 1900s. And the reason is because world leaders got together and they tried desperately to work on a very noble cause, which was to eradicate world hunger. And in doing that, they literally genetically modified a wide variety of grains, specifically wheat, barley, and rye, to be able to be grown in different parts of the world and still yield a very hearty product, so that they could feed the world and get rid of world hunger. But what didn't happen is that as those genetic changes were happening, the science behind whether or not a human body could actually metabolize those grains and yield the protein and the nutrients from those grains, that wasn't happening. And so all of those genetic modifications decrease the protein availability and actually increase the inflammatory response from the body because it looks so foreign to the body at this point. What we know is that because gluten is so foreign, that it can contribute to inflammation and also pain, specifically because of how the body responds. So if your gut is inflamed, it may not be healthy enough to actually absorb your nutrients from your foods. In fact, just eating normal foods can then leak out of the gut lining and land in other areas of the body, even on the skin. And with that, we see so many other complaints, concerns, and symptoms like psoriasis, like eczema, arthritis in joints and pains. And a lot of times that is stemming from what's actually happening in the gut. We also see bloating and distension. There's a lot of large, hard bellies that, some of these bellies look like they're more than 9 months pregnant. And it has everything to do with the health of the gut. But usually those individuals are kind of puffy in their face and their neck and other places in their body. And again, that's inflammation, and all of that can cause pain for a variety of reasons. We can absolutely test what's going on in the gut. And there's a wide variety of ways to do that. But there's a new term for what's going on in the gut, especially in an older individual. And what I mean by older and how they're terming it is basically people over 50. And it's called the Gyrobiome, or basically the environment in which the gut is manifesting in a 50 or 50 plus year old body. So the gerobiotics are the probiotics that are to maintain a healthy gut environment and improve life in an older population. Now, that is a very similar term to probiotics. And we have good probiotics and we have not so good probiotics. But identifying what those are is a key component to making sure that we're as healthy as possible. So these are the core 4 that I like to always recommend, because I think we can all benefit from a multivitamin, a good B complex, vitamin D, especially in our neck of the woods, but also fish oils, because we know that those are not necessarily elements that we get out of our food. We don't necessarily get them from the sun, and all of them can help decrease inflammation and pain. I also love magnesium, specifically magnesium glycinate, magnesium taurate, because it's calming. It's a natural way to reduce muscle inflammation. It's muscle relaxant. And it also helps to regulate blood sugar. And anytime our blood sugar is elevated, it does cause inflammation, and which can allude to pain. Magnesium is mandatory in over 400 different chemical reactions in the body. And in the Pacific Northwest, because a lot of times our water is coming from mountain sources, we tend to be magnesium deficient. And then also probiotics. What's a good one? I saw this one on TV. Is that a good one? What about this big old bucket of stuff that I just bought from Costco? Is that good? Do probiotics have to be kept in the refrigerator? There's a wide variety of brands, and there's a lot of ways that you can identify those, and we can definitely help. So Bulletproof is a wonderful collagen that I think is very helpful. And we've actually seen people report that they have less pain and inflammation by using either XCT oil or the Bulletproof Brain Octane. So both of those are medium chain fatty acids that help to reduce inflammation and pain. And we also know that the collagen helps to repair joint tissues as well. So all of these work as brain fuel, but also help to work in the gut. Digestive enzymes are not only helping us to digest the foods that we put in there, but as we get older, we tend to have less digestive enzymes in our body. But it's those same enzymes that we use to digest our food that actually work to reduce inflammation and stress on the rest of our bodies. Anytime that we can improve digestion and improve nutrient assimilation from our meals and support a healthy gut and the microbiome, we are going to see a reduction in inflammation and a better, healthier body, especially to slow down aging and repair tissues and skin. So it's important to test, not guess. So micronutrient testing is literally a blood sample that identifies those metabolic workhorses in the body. So do you have enough B vitamins? Do you have enough magnesium? What's going on with calcium? What about that vitamin D level? And we can identify exactly what's going on in the body so that we can replace just what's necessary and not add a bunch of things that are not important. We can also see that if there are micronutrient deficiencies, people are sluggish. They're tired all the time. It can contribute to hairline fractures just from simple stepping off of a curb improperly or tripping over a rock. The silent factors are that we can actually see tumor growth when we don't have enough of the right nutrients. And migraines are usually associated with a micronutrient deficiency. Toni Marthaler is a nurse practitioner in Green Bank, and she does telehealth, and she does the 3x4 genetics testing. So she's a counselor for that. It's a quick little cheek swab. It shows you over 36 core insights as to what's going on in your body, literally your genetic makeup that you were born with and what's going on now. So it tells you how healthy is your brain, how healthy are your organs, what type of exercise should you be utilizing? Do you assimilate caffeine very well? Do you metabolize it very well? In other words, if you're a 4, 5, 6 cup a day caffeine drinker and you don't metabolize caffeine very well, you're probably anxious and uptight and probably very inflamed, which can contribute to pain as well. But what we also know is that this genetic testing can give you insights as to you should be careful with salt or you should eat more salt, but also where you're at right now so that you could potentially avoid things like dementia and Alzheimer's, osteopenia, osteoporosis, and make an impact on your health today. When we see chiropractors, osteopathic physicians, acupuncturists, they can be very helpful in realigning the muscles and the ligature that attach to the bones so that the nerves can actually conduct their electricity appropriately, so that there isn't anything kind of in the way. So as a nerve comes through the muscle fibers, if that becomes inflamed, it's actually going to squish and pinch off that nerve and it's going to hurt. It may not hurt exactly where that's actually happening, but it might hurt elsewhere in the body. So a lot of people know about sciatica, right? It's like it kind of tingles down your legs. Sometimes it hits your toes, but really where it's happening is that nerve impingement is actually happening in your butt, or maybe it's happening in your back. And so that sciatic nerve branches off the lower part of your back and it kind of follows down your hip and goes in between the gluteal muscles and then branches off and goes down your leg. And you can have a wide variety of changes in that, which can result in inflammation and pain. It can also change the way blood flows through the body. Whereas osteopaths, chiropractors, acupuncturists, massage, that can all improve not only how nerves conduct their electricity, but also how blood is flowing to those body parts, which can decrease inflammation and decrease pain. Now, I will say what frustrates a lot of people, or at least what I hear, is that people have to go back over and over and over again. And the reason that they have to is because it's kind of like a rubber band. Our muscles and our ligatures are very much like rubber bands, and that if you stretch it out, it's going to stay in that position if it's stretched out for a long period of time. So to get it to go back to where it needs to go, it's going to need massaging and manipulating on a regular basis. So that can be kind of bothersome to a person's routine. Perhaps it's going to hit their pocketbook a little bit harder. But I will say that these complementary pathways of medicine are a lot of times much more effective than just taking a medication. So physical therapy, massage, yoga, those Pilates, those weight-bearing natural types of movement, a lot of times can decrease inflammation and decrease pain, especially not only now, but over time. We can also, I'm going to go back for a second. I'm not sure that this slide is in here, but we also now have a way to test the gut and actually look at the complete DNA sequencing of what is in the gut, and it's through microbiome testing. What I appreciate about this test is that it gives us a complete DNA sequencing of everything that's in your gut, including what's not in your gut. So it gives us those families and those species of the bacteria, fungus, protozoa, yeast that's in the gut, and it shows us what's beneficial and then what is potentially causing harm, so that we can make changes by using a wide variety of nutrients. But what it also does is it tells us what are those bacteria actually doing with our foods, and what is it creating further down the digestive pathways. That's really important, because sometimes we don't make enough factors that are our natural ways to reduce inflammation. And so we can make an impact on that just by changing, sometimes adding a vitamin or adding a supplement like butyrate or calming herbs, or simply avoiding certain foods, using calming and amino acids and herbal medications, so that we can soothe the gut, putting the proper types of probiotics back in the body that will survive digestion and therefore be helpful in the right ratios, and also heal the lining of the gut, so that we don't continue to see disruption of absorption. It also tells us what are we doing with our vitamins, and it also tells us what are we doing with our hormones, because our hormones have receptors on every cell lining the gut as well. So it's really important that we make sure that everything is kept in balance. That's the key. We have a variety of symptoms because something's not quite in balance. If everything were in balance, we would be a happy-go-lucky, very energetic, sleeping well, very productive individual. It's only when things are out of balance that we have a variety of symptoms, and sometimes that causes chronic illness. We want to avoid that. I mean, everybody does. And that's why we attend seminars like this, so that we can gain a little insight into that and see what we can do to make a change. So let's talk a little bit about how compounded medications could potentially help with chronic pain and inflammation. So a lot of people are familiar with muscle relaxants, pain medications, and a lot of those have a wide variety of side effects. They make you drowsy, they give you dry mouth, they make your eyes dry, they make you constipated. Well, a lot of times we can use some of those medications that we see orally, or even injectables. We could actually put those into pain creams and gels, so that we can apply it directly to the site where it hurts, but also then go back up the spinal column and apply it to where that nerve is coming out of the spinal column, and then make a dramatic impact. The beauty of using transdermal products, transdermal medications, is that we don't necessarily see the same side effect profile that we do with oral medications, because we're not asking the liver to change those. We're actually keeping the medication in kind of a localized area so that it can do its work right then and there. Now, we don't necessarily get the right ratio or the right medications right on the very first time. Sometimes we have to change the dose or change the mixture of those medications, because as we start treating that, sometimes one area will become better, but yet another area might become worse. And again, it has to do with the root cause of what's going on. As nerves regenerate, they tend to tingle. And some people think that, well, this cream made me tingle and itch, and so there must be something wrong with this cream, whereas really talking to your pharmacist will help you to understand that that nerve is actually just regenerating. It's actually getting better, but it's trying to send out electrical impulses, and that's where that tingling is coming from. But if it's really bothersome, we can use another medication and put it in that transdermal gel to kind of keep that down to a minimum. What's also absolutely phenomenal is because we're not applying these in the mouth and we're not taking them orally and then putting them in our gut, we can see better gut health as well. And a lot of times these medications are not as expensive as one might think, but when we see benefits and better health sooner than later, you're not necessarily spending years and years and years trying to get your answers and your issues resolved. When transdermal medications are applied directly to the skin, they're applied to the site of the pain or inflammation. And like I said, they're then able to transfer up to the dermatome where it is, where that root nerve is coming from. And because these can be applied anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe even 6 times a day, a lot of times we can use less medication because we're having to use this maybe a little more frequently. And then once we get the issues under control, we can simply decrease the use of that. So we have much tighter control, much better control. And we just don't see the side effects. Okay, so hormones. What has this got to do with anything? Well, hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone can dramatically affect how you perceive pain. They can also dramatically affect inflammatory processes in the body. Sounds weird, huh? But we have seen through scientific study that if your estrogen levels are low, if your progesterone levels are low, if your testosterone levels are low, we can actually see more inflammation and more pain, and especially more perception of pain. When we increase or balance all of those hormones, we can actually see a lot of that subside. It may not totally go away. We may not completely eliminate pain and inflammation, but we do know that it decreases. And we can also see better brain health and better gut health, and a much better response to modulating our immune system. Hormones play a very key role throughout our life, but that doesn't mean that we have to continue to use hormones at the same level that we normally do in our 20s and 30s when we are well into our 50s, 60s, and 70s, or even 80s. It needs to be physiologic and specific to what is needed in your body. Sleep. Are you sleeping? I will say, it's probably 80% of the people that show up at the pharmacy that ask questions or call the pharmacy and ask questions. That's one of the biggest issues that they talk about. They're either having night sweats or they're having vivid dreams. Something is bothering them. They can't get to sleep, or they can get to sleep, but then they wake up at the same time every morning and then they can't get back to sleep. Or they just wake up a variety of times during the night and they don't feel rested when they wake up in the morning. And a good night's sleep is absolutely critical to decreasing inflammation and pain. Some people say melatonin works really well. Some people say, oh, I've tried it and it doesn't do anything for me. And that usually tells me that your hormones are not balanced either, especially vitamin D and thyroid, but also progesterone. Magnesium glycinate not only helps the gut, but also helps us to sleep better. It actually helps to reduce inflammation, helps to rest and relax those muscles so that we can get to sleep and stay asleep. We can also compound a wide variety of medications like melatonin in with oxytocin. And oxytocin is a natural hormone in our body that helps us to process grief and depression better. It also helps us with libido. It helps us with orgasms. And it helps us to just feel better connected, a lot less depression. LDN is short for low-dose naltrexone, which is a prescription product. Oxytocin is too, by the way. But we use low-dose naltrexone to help not only block those pain receptors, but also decrease the amount of inflammatory chemicals that are circulating through our body. And it also helps to modulate the immune system. It's a very low dose medication. So if you Google naltrexone, you're not going to get the information that I'm talking about tonight. You're actually going to get information that is valid for naltrexone used in very large doses, 50 to 300 milligrams, that we often use for addiction issues, whether it's alcohol, methadone, opiates, etc. But when we use naltrexone in very small doses, anywhere from 1 microgram to perhaps 4.5 milligrams, we can actually see very, very different activity with that medication than we see in higher doses. The beauty of it is that we can manipulate those doses. We can actually slowly increase those doses so that we can find whatever is going to be best for you. And it's available in a wide variety of dosage forms. So not everything is a capsule. Sometimes we can do creams or transdermal products, as well as things that go under your tongue, sublingual drops. Estrogen is really important for the brain, for the gut. It also helps to decrease some of the issues, some of the neuron breakdown that is associated with Alzheimer's and dementia. It decreases oxidation of the nerves, and it turns on progesterone receptors, which tends to be very relaxing. And estrogen increases blood flow, not just in the brain, but elsewhere in the body. Progesterone has dramatic impact on helping the nerve outer lining to improve and promote the formation of that. So when we have autoimmune disease like fibromyalgia and multiple sclerosis, balancing hormones is very, very important. And that is, this is some of the science behind how progesterone can be used to decrease memory decline. We know that progesterone specifically reduces pain and inflammation. There are some surgeons that actually use a liquid form of progesterone, and they bathe or they will squirt progesterone liquid over the top of a surgical site to reduce inflammation. And these are some of the reasons why progesterone will decrease in the body. And gosh only knows, you know, the last 2 years have been really something incredibly stressful. And at this point, people are psychologically exhausted, physically exhausted, and we are seeing so many hormone changes, gut changes, increasing chronic pain, increasing chronic inflammation. We're seeing a lot less thyroid being low functioning thyroid being diagnosed. And it's not just everyday people that are exhausted, it's healthcare professionals as well. But we also want to make sure that our blood sugar levels are maintained, and we want to make sure that our energy levels are as best as they can be. We want to make sure that we have good libido, and we want to make sure that our hair stays exactly where it's supposed to. And we can do that by balancing our hormones as well. Testosterone is a really interesting hormone. So this is one of the hormones that's actually a controlled substance. And all of these hormones do require prescription. But what I find is that the commercially available products are fine and dandy for maybe a third of the population, but there's a lot of people that complain about the side effects. And I think it's mainly because, there's really only about 3, 4, 5 different doses that are available for a variety of hormones, whether it's estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone, but rarely are providers actually testing. Sometimes they might look at it in blood, but these hormones are oils and they really don't have much activity in the blood. So they're not supposed to be in the blood. They're supposed to be in the tissues. That's kind of where they do their work. So in my 35 years of being a pharmacist, I have found much more physiologic parameters, especially associated with hormones, when we look at saliva testing versus blood, or whole blood, I should say, because hormones do passively migrate through the salivary pool, in and out of the capillary system to get to the target tissues. So we do see a better resemblance or a semblance of hormones when we evaluate salivary testing. Now, I also like to look at dry urine testing when I need to look at what is the body actually doing with the hormones and how is it metabolizing those hormones, because there are better pathways than others. And sometimes those not so great pathways could actually lead to cancers, especially hormonally related cancers. And if we can stop that process or interrupt it early, perhaps we can prevent all of that. So that's really important. Oh, and I also want to point out that when we give testosterone to men, we have to be careful that that man is no longer wanting to produce children, because when we put testosterone on the skin, whether it's in a gel or a patch, it can decrease a man's sperm count and then it can yield them less fertile. So we have to be careful of that. And oral testosterone isn't something that we see on a regular basis, because in the past, it's actually been associated with liver cancer. Okay, I'm going to take a little breath and a sip of water here. And as we talk about low-dose naltrexone, so I mentioned it just a little bit ago. Let's do a further dive into this. So low-dose naltrexone helps so many people, but the unfortunate part is that you're only going to hear about it from an LDN specialist like myself. You might hear about it from some providers, but there's just not a lot of information out there. And the reason is because a big pharmaceutical company doesn't make this. It has to be compounded. However, there are over 900, perhaps closer to 950 scientific studies and case studies that have been published over the last almost 40 years at this point. So naltrexone was actually FDA approved back in the 60s. We know that it has been helpful in addictive behaviors and addiction issues. But in 1985, when Dr. Bahari was using naltrexone for his AIDS patients that were also alcoholics, and because most of these individuals weren't working, they were breaking up their tablets to make them last longer, their immune factors started to improve. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing, because these were individuals that had progressive AIDS and autoimmune deficiency syndrome. And with that, he was seeing that these gentlemen were getting better. And this was AIDS that was sexually transmitted, not necessarily transmitted through IV drug use. So those are two different categories of individuals. And so with that, he started doing some deeper dive into that. And then he met up with other physicians and other researchers across the globe, and they started to compile their information. And like I said, now there's perhaps 950 articles written. Many articles have actually been written in the last 5 or 10 years on how low-dose naltrexone works in so many different disease issues. And when you look at this slide, you kind of go, okay, so how is autism associated with breast cancer, associated with infection, associated with obesity, associated with allergies and diabetes and chronic pain and inflammation. How are all those connected? Well, the bottom line is all of that is due to cellular inflammation, every bit of it. Now, what causes that cellular inflammation might be different for each one of those issues. But if we know that low-dose naltrexone actually works at the cellular site to decrease inflammation, to decrease the chemicals that actually cause that, to help modulate the immune system, to help the natural ways the body fights pain, that's going to be helpful in a wide variety of issues. Plus, it's really low risk. It has very low side effect profile, and it's not very expensive. So that's why I think it's just amazing. Here's a little bit of information on that. And by the way, if you would like a copy of the Dartmouth paper, send me an email to michelle@makerspharmacy.com and I will get that for you. The Dartmouth paper is literally the summary of 900 published articles and summary case studies divided into disease states, and also shows those studies and the outcomes of those studies. And the reason why it only summarizes the first 900 or so articles is because the Dartmouth paper was actually published in 2017 or 2018, I believe, and it hasn't been revised. It was put together by a physician who was really tired of having to search for all of these articles based on disease state. And so he took it upon himself, and he literally took a large chunk of time and summarized everything. And then, we're handing it out to everybody. There's also 2 books written. So there's the LDN book volume 1 and the LDN book volume 2. And later this summer, there will be LDN book volume 3. And you can also check out not only our website, but the ldnresearchtrust.org is a great website to look for, perhaps you have fibromyalgia, which is one of the most difficult issues to treat: chronic pain, chronic inflammation, chronic fatigue. We use LDN on a regular basis and work with individuals with fibromyalgia and help them to restore better quality of life. This is the actual mechanisms by which it's used. And you've probably heard of interleukin-6, especially in the last couple of years, because we know that the COVID virus, when it gets into the lung, would actually trigger interleukin-6 production, which then caused a lot more inflammation. And that's how, and then fluid started to form in the lungs. And then literally people were having issues with breathing and died from lung capacity issues. But what we also know is that LDN helps to decrease tumor growth, and it actually helps to reduce inflammation through a variety of processes and helps heal the gut because of how it binds to the gut. And this goes into a really deep dive into the chemistry behind low-dose naltrexone. But I wanted to put this here because when we know the science behind this and how it actually binds, we can see how LDN actually helps with reducing inflammation, helps to reduce pain. It helps to speed healing, reduce growth of any tumor cells, and then specifically block pain receptors so that you don't feel pain the way you normally would. This is Dr. Bahari. He unfortunately is no longer with us, but he left behind this legacy of amazing research and materials as to how low-dose naltrexone actually works. And we have since then taken that information, and a wide variety of researchers and chemists, physicians, and pharmacists have studied this even further. There are a wide variety of protocols out there. The standard initial protocol was to start someone on 1.5 milligram, leave them on that dose for a week or two, possibly a month, then increase that to 3 milligrams, again, leave them on that for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and before going up to 4.5. And what we found is that that works at about 50% of the time. But when we want to treat the other 50% of people, we actually start much lower, perhaps 0.1 or 0.5 milligram, and slowly increase that dose over time, perhaps anywhere from 9 to 17 weeks. And what we also try to do is set up the real parameters by which a patient is going to respond. Some people respond to low dose naltrexone treatment within a few days. Some people, it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months to respond. And that doesn't mean that the medication isn't working for you. It just means that you as an individual, there's a wide variety of other parameters that have to be reduced as well. So if LDN doesn't work for you in the first month, it doesn't mean it's not going to. It means we just need to give it some more time. And a lot of times adjusting those doses are very important. We also find that sometimes when people start on the 1.5, 3, 4.5 protocol, that they skip over their happy dose. So we have to back it off. And a lot of times a lower dose is better for LDN than a higher dose. We also know that because low-dose naltrexone blocks receptors intermittently, we can see an upregulation of the body's production of natural painkillers. And that is really, really important. This is a citation for that. And again, this is fairly recent research. This is from 2018, literally not even 4 years ago. So it's like, why aren't we hearing about this? This is the Dartmouth paper that I was talking about. And again, if you need a copy of that, please email me, Michelle@makerspharmacy.com, and I will get you a copy of that. So when we dose low-dose naltrexone, we can use capsules, we can use liquids, we can use troches, which are little wafers that are dissolved underneath the tongue. We can also use transdermal gels. A lot of times these different dosage forms are specific to the rationale behind what we're trying to treat. We use transdermal gels more in individuals who cannot swallow, especially very young people. We do use low-dose naltrexone in a transdermal gel for autism. And I literally had a mom, and this is really emotional, for the first time, her 3-year-old looked her in the eye and said, "Mommy, I love you." And because he had been diagnosed being on the spectrum, and she literally started using transdermal low-dose naltrexone. She took gluten out of his diet, and he changed dramatically inside a few months. He became more social. He became easier to bond with. He actually had more eye contact. He became much more verbal. And when he told her, "Mommy, I love you," for the first time in his entire life, that was just absolutely poignant. It's literally one of my most memorable moments of being a pharmacist. It's just, it's the reason why I do what I do. Yes, so we also use low-dose naltrexone to help with weight loss. We know that it is a combination of naltrexone with bupropion in the commercially available product Contrave. In very low doses, we use more for chronic pain, and a lot of times we're using that not just once a day, but twice a day. But in ultra low doses, in microgram dosing, there's been a wide variety of studies done at Stanford and Yale that we could actually help people get off their opiates. And that's really, really important for a lot of people who have got inflammation and pain, because they're started on opiate medications and they become attached to those, perhaps addicted to those physically and emotionally, and they are tired of that over time. And they want to get off of it. And so we can literally substitute low-dose naltrexone, get them off their opiates, and still reduce the inflammation and pain. What we do know, and this is probably a question that people are thinking of, is, do I ever get off LDN? Yeah, you can get off LDN. You can literally just stop. But what I will also say is that once you stop, a lot of times the benefits stop. So we know of people that have been on low-dose naltrexone for autoimmune issues, specifically for well over 20 years. I know that there have been many physicians that have shared that patients are taking low-dose naltrexone, they go on vacation, they forget it at home, and they all of a sudden feel everything again. Their issues, their symptoms come back, and then they get home and they start their LDN again, and whoop, there they go. They're right back on track. And that's really important to also understand that LDN doesn't cure anything. It actually works on natural mechanisms in the body to trick the body into working the way it's supposed to, much more efficiently, much more effectively. And so that's why if we remove LDN, the symptoms just tend to come back. And sometimes the inflammation and pain comes back as well. Dosing is always individualized, and that's why follow-up and closely monitoring a patient is very important. Because like I said, if you do have a side effect that pops up, it may not necessarily be due to the LDN, it could be due to the underlying disease. Sometimes an autoimmune disease or chronic pain and inflammation is actually caused by yeast or fungus or a bacteria or a virus, that as you decrease the inflammation, it starts to surface. And then once it gets out of the surface, it blooms. So some people feel worse before they get better. But if they stop the low-dose naltrexone, it just chronically will continue that issue, that underlying infection or that underlying inflammatory process. So we can help to reduce all of that, because a lot of times in using low-dose naltrexone, we can decrease the amount of traditional medications that we use to treat those situations, including chemotherapy in cancers. This is an example of a titration kit that we use to help people increase their dose over time without taking literally a handful of capsules. It also helps to outline very easily exactly when you're supposed to increase your dose. This is a website that we have developed, theldnpharmacist.com, where not only can we find and provide for patients, but also their providers, a wide variety of information on low-dose naltrexone, the use of it, the application of it, when to dose, how to dose, and specifically, is a low-dose naltrexone appropriate for the patient that's standing in front of you? We do use low-dose naltrexone for dogs in cancer issues as well as anxiety. You can follow our blog posts. You can follow our seminars and our webinars. You can always register for our webinars on our website, or a text webinar to our phone number, 360-757-6677. And maybe that's the way you registered for this one, who knows? So there's a few other simple treatments. Synapsin is a wonderful derivative of an Asian ginseng. So it's a natural derivative of an herb product. And we combine that with nicotinamide. And with that synapsin, it's used in a nasal spray with a little bit of B12. And therefore, it is delivered directly to the brain to decrease inflammation. We use this for traumatic brain injury. It can be used very easily in combination with low-dose naltrexone and other medications as well. And we see that this has been very, very helpful even in the NFL. So this medication has been used in football players who, they constantly bang heads together. And eventually that's going to cause some inflammation. And some people have had personality changes and unfortunately have taken their own lives and have died prematurely because of that inflammation. So we use synapsin to help decrease the root causes of the inflammation and block those pain receptors and those brain cells. It just explains a little bit more specifically how synapsin works. And this is also information that we provide to a wide variety of prescribers. So we combine this with a little bit of B3, and this works incredibly well to decrease inflammation. And the reason why we put it in a nasal spray primarily, we can put it in a sublingual drop, but we see better benefits with the nasal spray because the nerve that goes directly from the nose it goes from the nose directly to the brain, whereas every other nerve actually bypasses and does a little zigzag before it gets to the brain. We also use synapsin to help reduce inflammation due to stress and chronic stress. So this is really helpful for individuals who are in the medical field, who are feeling very stressed. It can be combined and prescribed side by side with oxytocin nasal spray to also help with depression and grief. And neither one of these are terribly expensive. This is specifically how this prescription is written. So we use methcobalamin, which is a methylated form of B12, a little bit of synapsin. We put it in a nasal solution, and we use 2 sprays in the nostrils 3 times a day. And we dispense either 15 or 30 mils, usually 15 mils, so that it can be kept fresh. This isn't a medication that we like to have hanging around for a long time. It does degrade. And the reason why we add B12 is we've got to have something in there that has a USP drug monograph, because synapsin is not FDA approved, but we do know how it works to improve the pro-inflammatory processes to reduce inflammation, and is neuroprotective. And B12 has a lot of these other characteristics as well. Oxytocin is a natural hormone to the body. It is released during orgasms or even just during hugging. It helps us to connect with people. It's when a baby is born and the baby is placed on mommy's chest, that instant oxytocin flow helps us to bond and feel closer to that baby. But it also is, especially when 2 women hug, because there isn't any nuance of any sexual indications there, we can see better rising of the oxytocin levels in the brain, especially woman to woman. Oxytocin helps to reduce endorphins, which are our natural painkillers. It helps to reduce pain. It does contract muscles. So if somebody has an irregular heartbeat, we have to be careful using oxytocin. But it does help us to maintain healthy weight, as well as sexual desire, improves libido, improves orgasm. It lowers our stress levels. It lowers our stress hormone levels. And it also helps to change the way glucose is metabolized in the body. I really like oxytocin, especially for those individuals that feel a lot of stress. And we see oxytocin prescribed a lot with fibromyalgia. So, we've had virtual teachers for a very long time, whether it was Bill Nye the Science Guy, Mr. Rogers, we've loved these individuals forever. Who doesn't love Bob Ross, and who doesn't love the creators of the Muppets, but and especially, now her name totally escapes me, but the wonderful narrator and the wonderful lady from Magic School Bus. We've had a variety of virtual teachers for a long time, and I appreciate that you've allowed me to be one of those individuals as well. And honestly, what can we do to help you? You can visit us at the pharmacy. You can call or text our phone number. We do receive a wide variety of texts, and you're welcome to email me at any time. I do answer my emails often. I do carve out personal time as well. So if you do email me and I don't respond within 24 to 48 hours, give the pharmacy a call and make sure that I'm not on vacation. Got to have my downtime too. So if I take care of myself, I can take care of you. This is a QR code that you could connect with us. You're welcome to connect with us online. We have a wide variety of social media platforms and websites as well. And our next webinar is going to be on custom solutions to dermatology, because what we also see is that chronic pain and inflammation isn't necessarily just an ache in the muscle. Sometimes that chronic pain and inflammation is due to changes in our gut that land on our skin, or our painful skin conditions. And we will go over a wide variety of those. And again, those are all through Zoom. And you can register for our seminar in dermatology for May 19th. And then we're going to talk about men's health in June, and that'll be on June 16th. So again, I thank you very much for joining us this evening. And if you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of us at any time. And if there's anything else I can do for you, reach out. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening. We'll talk to you soon.